Chapter 29. Stay away from crabs, or we don't do crabs. What on earth does the title of this chapter stand for? You'll find out in a minute. First, I'll talk about Marisa Peer. Marisa Peer is a hypnotherapist who has helped CEOs, royalty, Olympians, and hundreds of others overcome their phobias. When I watched 5 mental models of superachievers on Mindvalley, she essentially advised her readers to start the task that they hate the most first thing in the morning. Marisa Peer is awesome. She is so cool and in control. When she was diagnosed with uterine cancer, she could have asked, "Why me?" or said, "I don't deserve this." She instead maintained an attitude of optimism and said, "I am not doing illness." She began an anti-cancer diet and changed her lifestyle. Those words showed that she was not a victim but in control. I don't do sickness. We don't do victim. We don't do crabs. I'll come to crabs in a minute. I had been thinking about writing a book about my stroke recovery for a while, but I couldn't seem to get started. I was procrastinating. Marisa Peer gave an example from her life, before she became famous, of getting up in the morning, and the first thing she did was call magazines, trying to promote her work. She hated that, but she kept doing it. And at a specific moment, she realized that she didn't hate it anymore. She had become successful calling magazines, and it had turned into a habit. This is the same technique she used to write her book. She started writing first thing in the morning. Why am I telling you this? Because I also use the same exact technique to write this book, first thing in the morning. At first, I hated it. My ego had stopped me several times with comments like, "Just don't bother. You're not a writer anyway," or "Who do you think you are?" At other moments, I would think to myself, nobody's gonna read your book anyways. There were plenty of reasons I could have come up with not to write, but a voice within encouraged me. Even if you only make a difference in one stroke survivor's life, your book is worth writing. So I kept going. And after 2 months or so, I developed so many ideas and angles to write about that I began to like the process of writing. In fact, I found it difficult to stop and started looking forward to it every day. But once again, it took me 2 months to feel that way, all the while getting up each day and not wanting to write at all. If you can discipline yourself to do something every day for about 2 months, then it becomes a habit. Now, what about crabs? Let me explain. I was reading a book called Man Up: How to Cut the Bullshit and Kick Ass in Business and in Life by Bedros Keuilian. Bedros coaches entrepreneurs who want to operate at an even higher level by becoming disciplined entrepreneurs and destroying any limiting behaviors that create bottlenecks in growth. In this book, he wrote a chapter called "I Have Crabs," which is kind of hilarious. He told a story about watching a fisherman fishing for crabs. There was a bucket next to the fisherman with a lot of crabs in it. He saw one crab that wanted to escape, and he almost made it. Bedros told the fisherman, "Put a lid on that bucket because crabs are escaping." The fisherman calmly replied, "No need for a lid." Bedros couldn't believe what happened next. The ambitious crab was hurtling toward freedom when, suddenly, the other crabs grabbed its legs and pulled him back down. The scene resonated with Bedros about events and people in his personal life. "I also have crabs in my life," he said. "They're trying to pull me down." Crabs like the ones in this story are a metaphor for toxic people who bring you down. In every person's life, there's a spectrum of toxicity. Some people around you are mildly toxic. They can be an annoyance to you. Others are so toxic that you can feel hatred toward them or the urge to avoid these people altogether. When you live in a negative environment with too many toxic people close to you, it will rob you of your utmost potential. The reason is simple. Poisonous people drag you down with their limiting beliefs. You often have to work incredibly hard to counteract their effects. Life is too short to live with toxic and difficult people. I want to live a life where people around me both support me and want the best for me, just like I do for them. Motivational speaker Jim Rohn said notably that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Write down the hours that you spend with these people, your top 5. Those are the ones who have the most influence on you. I saw things more clearly now. I would choose to surround myself with positive, empowering people. No more negative or disempowering people around me. I needed to cut some people out of my life entirely. Those had stepped on my boundaries and principles again and again. The discussions above does not mean that you should cut those people out after 1 or 2 mistakes, but everyone needs their own set of ethics and boundaries for peace of mind. If those problematic people continue to step on your hopes and dreams, push you, hoping that you'll change and do things their way, or completely ignore your belief system and disrespect you, it may be time to cut them out of your life altogether. Let me illustrate this from my own experience. I hate it when people talk badly about other people. My first cut was a person who did precisely that in a very sneaky way. Putting my newly acquired knowledge to work, after a barbecue, I cut this woman out of my life. I won't tell you who she was, but I can tell you I had known her quite well for at least 8 years. There were not many people at this barbecue, and I knew everyone there. This happened about 5 months after my stroke, when I could go home from the clinic on weekends. She sat on the other side of the table talking to my husband while her husband completely ignored me for the whole dinner. She just said hello and goodbye to me, that was all. Later someone told me she has difficulties dealing with sick people. That didn't make it better, but worse. My rebuttal was, I'm not sick, I've had a stroke. She came to visit me once at the rehab center, but after I came home, she didn't visit a single time, even though I lived close to her daily route to work. I kept that decision to myself. That was not a hard thing to do at the time, since I could hardly speak. I cried in the car on the way home from the barbecue. My husband and children asked what was wrong, but I couldn't say anything just then. To see each other in good times, to have a drink or a meal, that was one thing. But in bad times, she stayed away. Someone like that is not a true friend, and that is why I cut her out of my life. How to recognize a toxic person. Although they are incredibly charming at times, they feed off your energy. I later realized I always felt drained after meeting with her. I'm not an expert on toxic people, and for you, it is crucial to recognize your own set of toxic people. Just go on Google and type in toxic people. There, you might get answers to your personal dilemmas with people like that. Further, I found that the characteristics listed below are included in almost every article about toxic people. 1. They are manipulative and want others to do what suits them. 2. They can be judgmental and talk badly about other people. 3. They never seem vulnerable. 4. They make you defend yourself. 5. They are not caring or interested in what's important to you. 6. They don't apologize. 7. They can't handle critics. 8. They begrudge. 9. They lack real compassion but can pretend to have compassion if it suits them. 10. they want to be the center of attention. And 11, they are pleasant and charming if the situation goes their way, usually when they are the center of attention. For me, this means that toxic people, even though they are often smart, are not well developed and run their lives in a sort of animalistic way. They are in the low conscious state. By now, I had become a pretty good judge of character. Usually, this subjective judgment comes with age, but has always been known to arrive spontaneously after a significant life event or injury. After my stroke, this development went into turbo mode. I quietly observed people because I couldn't speak to them. Even before my stroke, I didn't have many friends in Germany and the Netherlands. My hectic lifestyle with 3 children and their various activities while working 50 hours a week left me with no time to even go to the hairdresser without my laptop in tow. It also didn't leave much energy for friends. After my stroke, all of this changed rather remarkably, for the better. I wanted to add more positive people in my life, but how? I couldn't talk normally, so how would I find people who wanted to hang out with me and get to know me? Believe it or not, there were quite a few. There was one friend who lived just a few houses away and worked for my company. You'll remember Mariana from the 2nd chapter. She was right there when I had my stroke. I started seeing her more often, and one time she said to me, "I've been going to this yoga class. I really like it, and maybe you should come as well." Before my stroke, I would have let that pass. But now I was seriously considering it, grinning at the mental picture of me standing on my head. "Why not? Let's go for it," I said. That would undoubtedly require me to get out of my comfort zone, but I'd also have a chance to meet some new women who could become friends. Anne was the yoga teacher. I liked her straight away. She was 39, good-looking, and had the same kind of humor as me, putting herself on the spot a lot. She had been taught some hard life lessons. She lived in Argentina for 7 years, working hard and running her own company together with her husband. After several disappointments in Argentina, they moved to my hometown, Elton, and there she continued working too much. She told me that when she had her first child, she was working for a client of hers that had an auction website, something like eBay. She could be up all night monitoring the site at peak periods so she could contact programmers on standby if necessary. She would do this from Germany for a client in Argentina while breastfeeding her baby, Isa, and working for hours at her computer. Then suddenly, one day, she'd had quite enough. She stopped working 60 hours a week and made a radical career switch, becoming a yoga teacher. We bonded almost immediately, as I did with each of the other 10 to 12 yoga friends. We were all 30 to 50 years of age and got along well together. I proposed that we take a trip together. All of them said yes. We went to Ibiza at the end of the summer of 2018. A girls-only trip like we hadn't taken since our teenage years. The week was a success, complete with a lot of laughter about silly jokes. We did yoga on the beach and watched the sunset. One perfect night, Anne gave a yoga class on the terrace of our house, under the stars. How abundant my life is, now that I have real friends that practically live next to me. I was happy that I dared to be vulnerable, dared to approach them even though I could hardly talk. Why am I sharing this with you? Because I know that while recovering from a stroke, you will need all of the energy you can preserve. Prevent toxic people from stealing that precious energy from you. Stay away from crabs, and be vulnerable at the same time to kind people who want the best for you. Chapter 30. Plateau, How You Learn to Love It. Things hadn't been working out relationship-wise between Remco and me. He was often in a bad mood over the last year or two, and yelled at me quite frequently. Basically, he was temporarily toxic. Temporarily toxic? You might say, is that even a thing? Yes, it is because I'm using it, and in fact, I invented it. I have had my share of this too. I got up early and went to bed early, while he's a night owl and kept my fitness equipment all over the living room. Anyone can be toxic or unpleasant at times, and that includes me. I have been temporarily toxic on occasion. But when the people involved are not truly cruel or nasty and you know that it's a temporary condition, there is no reason to cut them out of your life. They are merely overwhelmed people operating under stressful circumstances, usually for a short period, at least in my opinion. The most common reasons that cause people to behave in a toxic manner towards their loved ones include stress at work, burnout, or a state of depression. Remco was stressed at work and perhaps he could feel the beginnings of burnout. Dealing with the multi-layered events surrounding my stroke couldn't have been easy either. The stress and uncertainty of the stroke and my prognosis, driving back and forth to the rehab center each day for 6 months to visit me being suicidal, all worrying about the successes and failures of my recovery, and fretting about the impact on the children and on him, I knew that it had taken a toll on him and my entire family. Keeping that in mind, what I shared in the last chapter, don't let negative people drag you down like a crab. It was also unfair for me to be dealing with Remco's bad moods while I was in the middle of my rehab. None of us were happy, and all of us were stressed. Remco had a travel agency that he ran with his sister, but he eventually left his job. Once he had created that opening in his life for something new, I suggested that he go on a long trip to think things through and try to rediscover some joys in his life. In spite of his initial reluctance to do so, he finally agreed. Off he went for 7 weeks to Dubai, India, Sri Lanka, Singapore, and several other countries. And when he returned, he had regained a relaxed and joyful state of mind. Having a sense of space between the two of us for a while was also good. I liked my time alone with Madeline, and I also enjoyed the company of my new friends. I worked out intensely each day, like I never had before, but I might have worked out a little too much. While practicing running on the terrace of our house, suddenly, boom, I fell. Mariana took me to the hospital. I learned that my left wrist was broken. Too bad it was my left wrist. If you remember from earlier chapters, I had wanted to break my right arm, so I was forced to use my left hand, hopefully engaging my brain in some additional healing. You'll also remember that Arjun gave me firm instructions to not do that. After my stroke, Remco sometimes sent me website articles from the German magazine Der Spiegel. One article in particular drew my attention. The author wrote that having a cast on your arm can change your brain in 16 days. Under those conditions, the brain changes to enable the awakenings of more neurons on the opposite side of the brain, so they can deal with the fine motor movements of the free arm. It reminded me of the story I previously shared about Top and the research monkeys. I promptly sent the article to Arjun, and he understood immediately. He promised, "We will get you a real cast for your right arm once you are out of that new cast on your left arm. But that means you have to sleep with the cast on as well," he said. I agreed. He was referring to a CIMTH program that he had designed for me. CIMTH, which stands for Constraint-Induced Movement Therapy for Home Use, was do-it-yourself CIMT for patients once they have moved beyond their time in clinics. I will dive deeper into this in chapter 38. In the hospital, I begged the doctor, with Mariana and Anne's assistance, to put a brace on my wrist instead of a cast. I didn't want my brain to change even more toward favoring my right arm and hand, and I reasoned that a brace would make it less probable. I got the brace and the doctor told me to take it easy. I should have listened to the doctor's instructions, but I didn't. After waiting one short day, I started to play ping pong again, all alone with half the table tilted up. I was trying to beat 2 shots in one set with 3 shots done in my left hand. When I refer to a set, I mean hitting the ball against the upstanding table and then again. I could already do it twice, but not 3 times. My wrist hurt a little, but I thought I could handle it. I managed to cope with the pain until that night, a sleepless night, when I was startled by the level of pain in my wrist and arm. I was ashamed at the thought of returning to the hospital. What was I supposed to say once I arrived? How could I tell them that I had completely disregarded what the doctor said? Tamara, a friend and next-door neighbor, asked me over for coffee to her house the next day. When I arrived, she looked at my face and immediately asked what was wrong. I showed her my brace, said it was broken, and then told her that I hadn't been able to sleep because of it. After admitting that I had been moving it too much, I told her I was worried I might have moved it into the wrong angle by ignoring the doctor's advice. Tamara, who is Dutch, immediately called the doctor's assistant and explained, in perfect German, what was needed. Tamara was a cut-the-crap type of woman, and she promptly hauled me over to the hospital. The wait for my scan was quite short this time, and afterward, I had a long talk with the doctor. We knew each other from an earlier episode when I fractured my tibia and damaged my knee. She was the doctor who operated and inserted 13 screws and plate into my leg and knee. I heard her when she told me to take it easy. She also explained that I couldn't run because of the previous injury to my right knee and leg. I thanked her and realized I could stop putting so much pressure on myself. It wasn't only the stroke that had damaged my ability to run, it was also the surgery. You won't ever see me participating in a marathon in the future, but I continue to do a little running on occasion, only 1,000 meters or so. However, over the next few weeks, I finally took it easy, and the time off gave me time to think about progress and setbacks. The latest episode with my broken wrist was one of several setbacks I experienced since my stroke. Should we call them plateaus or stagnation? If your recovery has stalled, or is even backsliding, like my latest broken wrist, you need to regard this retrogression as a plateau in the learning arc. A weak person might give up in misery, but a strong person persists. I wanted to be one of the strong ones. The only way to move past the plateau is to engage your body in manual transmission next time, not automatic. What do I mean by that? You have to do different activities. It may also be time to look for more progressive training that will move you to the next level. Look for something you haven't done before, like swimming or Nordic walking. About 1.5 years after my stroke, I started Nordic walking. When I began, my left arm was cramped and spastic, and it continued that way for the next 4 months. Then, after I began to do the pre-crawling exercises for margin, my left arm was almost in a normal posture after just 6 months of using the exercises. I found that I could make a cross-crawl movement when I walked. A cross-crawl movement is when you bring your left arm and right leg forward, and then you do the opposite with the right arm and left leg. I continued that way for the following 3 months, and then voila! I could walk with Nordic walking sticks. My current routine includes walking 3 kilometers with Nordic sticks, 4 times a week. Since I dig into the forest floor while propelling myself forward, my triceps are getting a good workout too. If you want to try this, start with the pre-crawling exercises laying down, such as cross crawl. When you can handle that, head out for Nordic walking. Remember though, do the pre-crawling very slowly in slow motion, because you activate more neurons this way. Performing that cross-crawl movement builds the bridge between right and left hemispheres. Electrical impulses and information can pass freely between the two portions of the brain. This bridging function is essential for physical coordination as well as intellectual activities, such as learning languages and reading. More importantly, cross-crawl patterns are hardwired in the spinal cord and thus, most often, not affected by a stroke. They are a great tool for your rehab. Moving on, have you tried swimming regularly? I started swimming 1.5 years ago, and at first, I could only stand or lie in the water. Then I progressed to swimming on my back with the right hand holding my left hand under my back. After 7 months of that, I was finally ready to attempt a normal swim. In the beginning, I absolutely sucked at it, but eventually, after spending 6 months on the pre-crawling exercises, I got the hang of it. I can now swim normally for 20 meters. I'm dead serious. If you're going to do well in every stage of your recovery, embrace the suck, as an elite soldier would say. That means that, if the situation is terrible, deal with it anyhow. Don't be arambashura, a Sanskrit word describing to someone who is a hero in the beginning but not at the end. Instead, be a hero all the way to the end.